I should like to ask, right at the outset, whether you believe the decision to take military action in March 2003 was indeed right.
It was the right decision, and it was for the right reasons.
What kind of person can make such an unequivocal statement when he now knows the devastating consequences of the unprovoked attack on Iraq by his country and the United States?
It was the right decision, and it was for the right reasons.
Only someone, I would suggest, who considers that he and his colleagues are unique human beings for whom the possibility of making a mistake is beyond their powers of comprehension. But how can this statement,
It was the right decision,
possibly excuse the carnage, barbarity and excesses which this decision led to? And how can this statement,
and it was for the right reasons,
excuse not only the deaths of over 1 million Iraqis and the maiming of many more, as well as the mental anguish of the living brought about by the deaths of loved ones, but the utter ruination of the infrastructure and culture of a nation with roots stretching back to the very beginnings of recorded history?
It was the right decision.
There cannot be a single person living in Iraq today whose life has not been adversely affected by what you say was done.
And it was for the right reasons.
What about them? And what about the children now being born into this shattered nation?
It was the right decision.
The right decision to achieve what? The removal of a dictator whose conventional forces were weak and who, as was suspected by many, had no weapons of mass destruction?
And it was for the right reasons.
Those right reasons being, I suspect, because Zionist Israel was pressuring the United States through AIPAC and Britain through the Friends of Israel to attack Iraq to further its own agenda for a Middle East under its control.
It was the right decision.
At the time this decision was made, it was more than probable that Saddam Hussein had no weapons of mass destruction whatsoever, that the Niger Yellow Cake letter was a hoax, and that the 45-minute attack scenario bandied about by Prime Minister Blair was a blatant lie.
And it was for the right reasons.
They were, in terms of credible intelligence, not reasons at all. They were mere suspicions that were being used to excuse an already settled agenda cooked up by Prime Minister Blair and President Bush long before. You knew, from personal experience, at the time that the decision to go to war was made, the tragedy of children born with life-threatening diseases, Mr. Brown. So you should be able to imagine the distress of the parents of children born like this. Yet you can still say,
It was the right decision.
Even though that decision included the intended use of a hideous weapon, not of mass destruction, but of ongoing and continuous destruction. Depleted uranium, where the depleted part is meaningless, an adjectival hoax, because if the radioactive isotopes of any kind of uranium come into close enough proximity to human reproductive cells, they can, and do, produce horrendous birth defects, like these. So-called depleted uranium is a genetic time bomb.
And it was for the right reasons.
And it was you, as Chancellor of the Exchequer, who signed off on the purchase of such weapons, when there was already plenty of evidence to suggest that they were causing genetic abnormalities from the time when they'd been used in the Gulf War and in Kosovo. But what are the results, Mr. Brown? Your right reasons have condemned little babies like this to either die an early and painful death or to endure a life that no one should have to endure. Either way, this is because you thought, at the time, and you can still repeat,
It was the right decision, and it was for the right reasons.